Julian Vance, was born a player, and I see emotion as a game of chess. As the heir to a corporate dynasty, my world consists only of assets and outcomes, wins and losses. That was until three women entered my game: an ambitious socialite angling for an alliance, a celebrity who saw me as her ultimate prize, and an ordinary girl who threw my entire strategy into chaos. It wasn't until a rival, cloaked in false kindness, tried to steal her away from me that I realized this game had long since spiraled out of my control. My assistant, Arthur, entered the office as I was leaning against the floor-to-ceiling window, gazing down at the financial heart of the city below. The glass reflected my impassive face. "Mr. Vance, your schedule." Arthur's voice was, as always, perfectly steady. "Victoria Davenport is confirmed for 3 p.m. to discuss the Southport District Partnership. Ms. Serafina Thorne sent over VIP tickets for her movie premiere tonight." And what? I turned, picking up the coffee from my desk. "And Cornerstone Coffee, the place Ms. Nora Hayes frequents, has a new special today." I took a sip. The coffee was good. Victoria Davenport, the perfect candidate for a strategic marriage. Sharp, efficient, my female counterpart. A union between us would expand the Vance Corporation's portfolio by 10%. Serafina Thorne, the A-list actress. Beautiful and barbed, like an exotic Persian cat always looking to test her claws on the lion she saw in me, savoring the thrill of the conquest. And Nora Hayes. She was just a barista at Cornerstone Coffee. I saw her for the first time on an afternoon I was trapped by a sudden downpour. I was handling business from my car, and through the rain-streaked window, I watched her hold a clear umbrella over a small succulent pot by the cafe's entrance, shielding it from the deluge. The scene was quiet and, frankly, boring. Yet, I watched the entire thing. The three of them were the multiple-choice question presented to me by my grandfather and a board. One represented profit, another represented fame. As for Nora, she was likely a product of my grandfather's misplaced romanticism, his idea that I needed a touch of reality. Julian Vance, need none of those things. I only need a win. And in this game called choosing a partner, I would, of course, be the one controlling the board. "Schedule the meeting with Victoria at Cornerstone," I said, setting down my cup. The command was clear. Arthur hesitated for a fraction of a second before nodding. "Of course, Mr. Vance." He didn't ask why. He knew that every one of my decisions had a purpose. What he didn't know was that my purpose was simply to watch a good show. 3 o'clock, Cornerstone Coffee. Victoria was already there when I arrived. She wore a tailored white pantsuit, her long hair pulled back, radiating power. She was the kind of woman I appreciated, goal-oriented, no nonsense. "Julian, you're 3 minutes late." She glanced at her watch, her tone not an accusation, but a statement of fact. "Traffic was heavy," I replied casually, my gaze drifting past her to the busy figure behind the counter. Nora was wearing the coffee shop's apron, her hair tied in a simple ponytail with a few loose strands framing her face. She was focused, head down, preparing a pour-over with the concentration of someone conducting a delicate experiment. "The ambience here is nice, more comfortable than a conference room," Victoria said, following my gaze for a second before dismissing it. She had no interest in such things. "Regarding the Southport project, I've prepared a new forecast." She slid a folder across the table. I ignored it, raising a hand to get a server's attention. "2 of the new specials." My voice wasn't loud, but it was enough for Nora to hear from behind the counter. She looked up, a flash of surprise in her eyes when she saw me, which was quickly replaced by a professional smile and a nod. She didn't seem to have any particular memory of me. That was unexpected. After all, my face appeared frequently enough in the city's business journals. "Julian," Victoria's voice held a note of impatience. I pulled my attention back to her. "Ms. Davenport, let's not talk business today." Victoria's brow furrowed almost imperceptibly. She couldn't figure out what game I was playing. Of course she couldn't. Just then, the bell over the cafe door chimed. A woman in a flamboyant outfit, complete with sunglasses and a wide-brimmed hat, strode in and headed directly for our table. It was Serafina Thorne. She removed her sunglasses, revealing a face that could launch 1,000 ships. Her red lips curved into a sultry smile. "Julian, what a coincidence. And this must be Ms. Davenport? I've heard so much about you." Victoria's expression turned cold. She didn't know Serafina, but she could sense the hostility. I leaned back in my chair, watching the scene with amusement. I'd had Arthur casually leak my afternoon plans to Serafina. It seemed to have worked perfectly. The two women's personalities clashed in the small cafe, charging the air with tension. And I was the epicenter of the storm. Nora arrived with 2 coffees, seemingly oblivious to the undercurrents. "Sir, your specials," she said softly. As she set the cups down, her wrist bumped the edge of the table. The cup wobbled, and a single drop of hot coffee splashed onto the back of my hand. It stung. My brow tightened. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry," she panicked, quickly grabbing a napkin to help me wipe it off. Her cool fingertips touched my hot skin. I flinched. "I'll do it," I said, pulling my hand back. My voice was colder than I'd intended. Nora's hand froze midair, and she looked lost. She bit her lip and whispered another apology. "I'm truly sorry, sir." Victoria, who had been watching coolly, chimed in at the perfect moment. "Julian, it seems the service here doesn't quite match the prices." Serafina let out a theatrical gasp and offered me her silk pocket square. "Use mine, Julian. It's much softer than paper." 3 women, 3 different reactions. One flustered and apologetic, one cold and critical, one seizing the opportunity to flirt. It was a more fascinating study of human nature than any market report. I ignored Serafina's offering, wiped my hand with a napkin, and said to Nora, "It's fine." My gaze fell on her eyes, which were starting to look a little red around the edges, and a strange wave of irritation washed over me. The game, it seemed, was already starting to deviate from my script. A few days later, a charity art gala. These events were always just transactional marketplaces disguised as culture. As a representative for the Vance Corporation, my attendance was mandatory. Arthur was murmuring beside me, listing the key players I needed to network with tonight. I was only half listening, my eyes scanning the glittering crowd. And then I saw her, Victoria. She was in a silver evening gown, the picture of elegance, chatting amiably with a business magnate. When she saw me, she raised her glass in a silent toast, her eyes conveying a message of partnership. Everything in its place. That was her style. Then I saw the other one, Serafina, a social butterfly flitting through the crowd, the center of everyone's attention. She could charm anyone, yet her eyes kept darting toward me, filled with a look of challenge and conquest. All of this was within my expectations. Until the third figure appeared. Nora. She was in a simple cream-colored dress, completely out of place amidst the opulence. She was standing with a girl in glasses, and they were quietly discussing a painting, so engrossed they were oblivious to their surroundings. What was she doing here? The question flashed through my mind. Arthur, ever efficient, immediately caught my line of sight. "Mr. Vance, that's Ms. Hayes. Her file says she majored in art and design. She's here with a friend." I nodded, picked up a glass of champagne, and started walking in her direction. My arrival shattered their little bubble of peace. Nora's friend recognized me instantly, her hand flying her mouth. Nora saw me too, and her expression became guarded, like a student caught misbehaving by the principal. "Mr. Vance," she greeted me quietly. "We meet again, Ms. Hayes," I said, looking at her. "You like this painting?" It was a piece depicting the deep ocean, dark and oppressive. Nora shook her head, then nodded. "I don't like it, but I think it's painted very well. You can feel the artist's loneliness." Loneliness, a word that had no place in this glittering hall of ambition. I was about to say something when a smooth, male voice cut in. "Nora, there you are." A man in a tailored white suit with a refined air walked over, standing beside Nora with an easy familiarity. It was Evan Cole, the second son of Cole Industries, our family's biggest business rival. This man was a master of disguise. To the world, he was the perfect gentleman, warm and polished. Only I knew the ambition and jealousy festering beneath that mask. He saw me and feigned the perfect amount of surprise. "Julian? What a coincidence. I didn't know you were interested in art." His words were barbed. Everyone knew Julian Vance was only interested in profit. "Moderately," I replied flatly. "Let me introduce you," Evan said, his arm resting lightly on the back of Nora's chair in a gesture of ownership. "This is Nora, my friend." He intentionally stressed the word friend, shooting a provocative glance my way. Nora seemed oblivious to the current between us, simply relieved by his arrival. "My family is one of the sponsors for the gala, so I can take a look," Evan said, his voice so gentle it was practically dripping honey. "This painting is too depressing. It's not for you. Let me show you something brighter." He started to lead her away. At that moment, 2 other sets of eyes in the room focused on our little group. Victoria's gaze was cold and analytical, assessing the sudden appearance of Evan Cole and his relationship with Nora, calculating its potential impact on the entire game. Serafina's eyes, however, danced with amusement. She even raised her glass to me, as if to say, well, a challenger appears. They both thought Evan was here for me. They didn't know that Evan's target from the very beginning was Nora, or rather, the Nora that I was interested in. What he enjoyed was the thrill of taking things from me. And Nora, she knew nothing. She just thought of Evan as a kind and considerate upperclassman from college. Yes, Arthur's file had noted they were alumni. Ms. Hayes, I spoke, my voice calm but firm enough to make them both pause. You said earlier you saw loneliness in the painting. I think you're wrong. All eyes were on me. I walked to the painting and pointed to its darkest section. This here isn't loneliness. It's a fish in the deep sea, watching the light on the surface. It's not enduring the darkness. It's waiting for the right moment to break through. When I finished, I looked at Nora. Her eyes held a flicker of confusion, but also a glimmer of understanding. Evan's smile was frozen on his face. He knew my words were for him, too. Another piece had just been placed on the board. No, he wasn't a piece. He was someone who wanted to flip the entire board over. This was getting interesting. The drama unfolded faster than I had anticipated. A few days later, a story broke on a financial news forum. A subsidiary of the Vance Corporation had serious environmental violations at its Southport District real estate project, contaminating the local water supply. Cornerstone Coffee happened to be in that district. The news caused an uproar. Vance Corp stock took an immediate hit. Arthur placed a report on my desk. Mr. Vance, someone is orchestrating this. We traced the initial leaks to a few media accounts with indirect financial ties to coal industries. I see. I leaned back, my fingers drumming a steady rhythm on the polished wood. Should we initiate the crisis PR protocol? Not yet, I said, looking out the window. Let's let the bullets fly a little longer. Evan's methods were still so crude. Did he really think this could shake the foundations of my family's company? Naive. I knew his real objective. Sure enough, that afternoon, Arthur reported back. Evan Cole went to Cornerstone Coffee. He's organized the local business owners, promising to lead a campaign for damages. He's even hired lawyers, covering all the costs himself. Did he see Nora? He did. Ms. Hayes was very grateful to him. I could picture it perfectly. While everyone else panicked and seethed over the contaminated water, Evan would descend like a savior. Calm, reliable, standing with the weak against the evil corporate giant, which was to say me. And Nora, that simple-hearted girl, what would she think? She would see the kind upperclassman who told her a painting wasn't for her as a true hero. She would see the cold man who'd curtly told her I'll do it in the coffee shop as a heartless capitalist. A perfect contrast to characters. Evan played this move beautifully. He not only damaged the Vance brand, but, more importantly, drew a deep line in the sand between me and Nora. He planted a seed in her mind. Julian Vance is the bad guy. Arthur couldn't hide his frustration. Mr. Vance, all we have to do is release the project's official environmental impact report. The rumors will be debunked. Why am I letting him have his moment? I finished for him. I stood up and walked to the massive window. If the prey falls into the trap that easily, where's the fun in the hunt? I didn't want a simple clarification. I wanted Evan to play every card in his hand. Then, at the peak of his triumph, I would annihilate him, cards and all. Besides, I turned to Arthur. Any movement for Victoria or Serafina? Ms. Davenport's company issued a statement temporarily suspending partnership talks on the Southport project, pending an investigation. Ms. Thorne's team has canceled her scheduled appearance at the opening of one of our new shopping centers. See? So predictable. When the wall starts to crumble, everyone pushes. And while the Vance Corporation was a wall that was nowhere near crumbling, they were already scrambling to mitigate risk and draw their lines. Victoria's choice, I understood. It was rational, businesslike. Serafina's choice, I also understood. It was self-preservation, the instinct of a celebrity. They both made the most correct decisions. But what about Nora, the one who should be running from me faster than anyone? What would she do? Suddenly, I had to know. Get the car, I told Arthur. We're going to Cornerstone. The atmosphere in Cornerstone Coffee was heavy. A few local shop owners were huddled together, discussing the water situation with worried faces. Evan sat among them, offering calm reassurances, playing the part of their leader. The moment I pushed the door open, all conversation stopped. A dozen pairs of eyes, angry, scornful, fearful, shot toward me. I was the wolf walking into the sheep pen. Evan was the first to stand, positioning himself in front of Nora, his face fixed with that practiced, disingenuous smile. Mr. Vance, what would a man of your stature be doing in a small place like this? His posture was that of a protector, and I, the aggressor. Nora stood behind him, her expression complicated. There was confusion, disappointment, and something else I couldn't quite read. My company has a problem. I'm here to see it for myself. Is there an issue with that? I ignored Evan, my eyes locked on Nora. See it for yourself? One of the merchants shot back, his voice rising. You want to see how we're going bankrupt because of you heartless suits? Our businesses depend on this water. Now that it's contaminated, what are we supposed to do? Yeah, don't think you can get away with anything just because you're rich. Get out. The crowd was becoming a mob. Evan held up a hand to quiet them, the picture of composure. Everyone, please calm down. I'm sure Mr. Vance isn't here to escalate things. Mr. Vance, are you here today to give us an explanation? He'd tossed the grenade to me. If I apologized, I was admitting guilt. If I argued, I was just making excuses. If I was forceful, I would confirm my image as the heartless capitalist. A perfect checkmate. I looked at him, and to his surprise, I smiled. An explanation? I scanned the room, my gaze finally settling back on Nora. My explanation is this. The Vance Corporation did not do this. My voice was quiet, but it carried an authority that could not be questioned. You didn't do it? Where's the proof? You got any proof? Someone immediately challenged. Not at the moment, I admitted freely. A wave of derisive snorts went through the crowd. The corner of Evan's mouth twitched upward. This was exactly what he wanted. He looked at Nora and said gently, Nora, don't be afraid. I'm here. I'll help everyone get justice. Nora didn't look at him. She stepped out from behind Evan and walked right up to me. The cafe fell silent. Everyone held their breath. They thought this seemingly fragile girl was about to represent all the victims and deliver a final, damning accusation against the great villain. Victoria would choose to hedge. Serafina would choose to flee. What about her? What would she choose? She looked me directly in the eye, holding my gaze for a long moment. In those clear eyes, there was no anger, no contempt, only a stubborn search for truth. Then she spoke. Mr. Vance, I believe you. Her voice was soft, but it landed like a bomb in the small coffee shop. Everyone stared, stunned. The most shocked of all was Evan. For the first time, the elegant mask on his face cracked. He looked at Nora in disbelief. Nora, I was stunned too. I had imagined 100 possible reactions from her. This was not one of them. What? I heard myself ask. Intuition, she replied quickly, then added, as if trying to convince herself, a man like you. You wouldn't bother to lie. A man like me? A man so proud, so arrogant, who saw everything as a game, would indeed find it beneath him to lie about something like this. She had actually seen that. This girl, who I had dismissed as simple and easy to read, had at the most critical moment seen through to my very core. In that instant, I felt something hard and shielded inside me crack, just a little. The color drained from Evan's face. His carefully orchestrated scene of hero saves the damsel, his public trial designed to nail me to the cross, had just been turned into a complete joke by Nora's simple words. I watched Nora, who had lowered her head after speaking, as if realizing her own audacity. The tips of her ears were bright red. I suddenly had the feeling that this game, the one I was supposed to be controlling, was spiraling. And, strangely, I didn't hate the feeling. I left the cafe and got into the car. Arthur watched me in the rearview mirror, hesitating. Just say it. Mr. Vance, I don't understand, Arthur admitted. Ms. Hayes, why would she believe you? I don't know either, I said, leaning back and closing my eyes. Nora's words, a man like you wouldn't bother to lie, echoed in my head. On what grounds? The handful of times we'd met, the drop of coffee on my hand, the pretentious comments I'd made at the art gala. I tug at my tie, irritated. Sir, Evan Cole's plan has been disrupted. He might make a more aggressive move now, Arthur reminded me. Let him, I said, opening my eyes, a cold glint in them. The more desperate he gets, the more mistakes he'll make. Keep a close watch on Cole Industries' cash flow, especially his personal accounts. Understood. Also, I paused. Look into the recent business performance of Cornerstone Coffee. Yes, sir. Arthur acknowledged the order, but didn't start the car. Something else. Mr. Vance, regarding Ms. Hayes, are you? Do your job, Arthur. I cut him off. Silence filled the car. I knew what he wanted to ask. Was Nora special to me? Yes. She was an unexpected variable in my perfect game. She didn't play by the rules, wasn't moved by profit, and wasn't fooled by appearances. She had, in the most direct and unrefined way, crashed straight through the core principles that govern my world. It gave me a feeling I hadn't felt in a long time. A challenge. And a flicker of interest. Over the next few days, Evan, as expected, didn't back down. He used the media to paint Nora as a naive girl fooled by a corporate villain. An army of online trolls even flooded Cornerstone Coffee's review pages with malicious comments, claiming the barista was unhinged and the coffee was probably contaminated. Business at the cafe plummeted. My expression darkened when I read the report. Evan had crossed the line. He could come after me, after the Vance Corporation. But to target Nora, an ordinary girl who just wanted to quietly make coffee, that touched a nerve I hadn't known I possessed. Mr. Vance, there's been movement in Evan's personal account. A payment of $50,000 was wired to a man named Rick Slater. Slater is a professional muckraker with a dirty reputation in the industry, Arthur reported, right on time. Excellent, I said, standing up. It's time to end the game. Your plans, sir? I'm hosting a dinner, I said, walking to the bar and pouring a glass of whiskey. I want you to invite all of them. All of them. Victoria, Serafina, Evan. I swirled the amber liquid, the ice clinking against the glass. And of course, Nora. Arthur looked confused. He couldn't understand why, at this critical juncture, I would choose to gather all the conflicting parties in one room. It seemed like throwing gasoline on a fire. He thought it was a trap. He didn't realize I was just setting the stage for a great performance. A play titled Just Desserts. The dinner was held in the penthouse of a private club owned by my family. Beneath a massive crystal chandelier, a long table was set with pristine white linen. When I arrived, Victoria and Serafina were already there. Victoria, sharp and composed as ever, approached me and spoke in a low voice. Julian, about the Southport situation, if you need the Davenport family's help, I can. That won't be necessary. I cut her off. Business is business. A flicker of something crossed Victoria's eyes, but she said no more. She knew her earlier statement had cost her points with me. Serafina glided over, a glass of red wine in hand, her eyes sultry. Julian, you're really putting me in a difficult position. The tabloids are already calling me your rumored girlfriend. With your company in trouble, it's getting hard for me to distance myself. She spoke of difficulty, but her face was electric with excitement. She thrived on this kind of drama. Is that so? I picked up a napkin and wiped my fingers. Then after tonight, you won't have to worry about that anymore. Serafina's smile froze. Just then, Evan arrived with Nora. He was still playing the perfect gentleman, pulling out Nora's chair, his voice a soft murmur of constant concern. Nora looked deeply uncomfortable. She had probably never been in a setting like this. When she saw me, Victoria, and Serafina, her anxiety deepened. They didn't know that the invitation I'd sent to each of them gave a different reason for the dinner. For Victoria, it was to discuss the future of the Southport project. For Serafina, to clarify rumors. For Evan, to seek a truce. And for Nora, I simply had Arthur tell her that I wanted to apologize in person. They all believed they were the sole protagonist of the evening. They were all wrong. Now that everyone's here, I said from the head of the table, tapping my glass with a fork. First, thank you all for coming. Julian, if you have something to say, just say it, Victoria said, her patience wearing thin. Fine. I put down my fork, my eyes sweeping over each guest before landing on Evan. Mr. Cole, you've been working so hard on my account lately. I appreciate it. Evan gave a placid smile. You're too kind, Julian. I just did what I felt was right. Did you? I picked up a remote and pressed a button. The large screen behind me lit up, showing a man with shifty eyes. The color drained from Evan's face. This man, I introduced, is Rick Slater, a professional muckraker. On the screen, Slater began to speak in a pre-recorded video. Yeah, it was Mr. Cole who hired me. He said he'd give me $50,000 if I could ruin the Vance Corp's reputation. Those water quality reports? I had someone Photoshop them. And the online trolls attacking Ms. Hayes? I hired them to... The atmosphere in the room shifted. Victoria's face was a mask of shock and understanding. Serafina's was one of undisguised schadenfreude. Nora's was one of complete and utter disbelief. She whipped her head around to look at Evan, her lips trembling. As for Evan, his face was ashen, a sheen of sweat on his forehead. Julian, he shot up from his chair, pointing at me. You faked this evidence. This is slander. Slander? I laughed. Don't be so hasty, Evan. There's more. I pressed the remote again. The screen changed to show internal financial statement from Cole Industries, followed by audio clips of Evan arguing with his father. Dad, trust me, if we take down Vance Corp this time, we'll win the biggest contract in Southport. You used the company's liquid assets for these dirty tricks. Are you trying to bankrupt the family? I have to beat Julian Vance. I have to. Every word echoed clearly in the dining room. I had peeled away Evan's disguise, layer by layer, until there was nothing left. He collapsed back into his chair, utterly defeated. I looked at him, and then at everyone else at the table. The game has only just begun. The room was dead silent, save for Evan's ragged breathing. He stared at the screen, at the evidence that would drag both him and his family into the abyss. His expression shifted from shock to rage, and finally to pure despair. Ow, he muttered. I was so careful. Careful, I chuckled softly, rising from my chair. I walked over to him looking down. You think that Rick Slater you bought off just happened to flip on you? You think Coal Industries' internal financial data just fell into my hands? You think the argument you had with your father in his private study was recorded by accident? With every question, the blood drained further from Evan's face. He never imagined that the pawns he thought he controlled had been my pieces all along. The fortress he thought was impenetrable had been breached from inside. From the very beginning, I never saw him as a rival. He was merely a tool. To clear my board, I turned to Victoria. Ms. Davenport, do you still think suspending our partnership was a wise decision? Victoria's face was grim. She was smart enough to know she had missed her chance to pick the winning side. She made a bet, and she had lost. In this game, she was already out. Julian, it was an error in my judgment, she admitted, her voice tight. Next, I looked at Serafina. Her smile was gone, replaced by a look of wary appraisal. She had thought this was a game of romantic pursuit, only to realize that the stakes at this table were fortunes and lives. You play a ruthless game, Julian, she said, raising her glass in a toast that was no longer flirtatious. My gaze finally came to rest on Nora. She was still reeling from the shock. She looked from the broken Evan to me, her eyes a storm of confusion. The kind mentor she had trusted was a despicable schemer. The cold capitalist she had been wary of was the one who had brought the truth to light with overwhelming force. Her entire sense of right and wrong had been shattered tonight. I walked her aside, my voice softening slightly. Do you still believe me now? She looked up, her lips parted, but no words came out. I didn't press her. I gave Arthur a subtle nod. 2 security guards entered the room and flanked Evan, who was still slumped in his chair. Julian, you can't do this to me. Evan finally snapped out of his stupor and began to struggle wildly. Our families have known each other for generations. You're going to destroy me. Destroy you. I walked over, calmly adjusting my cufflinks. My voice was low, but each word was laced with ice. You should have thought of that before you decided to drag her into this. My eyes flickered toward Nora. Evan followed my gaze, and a horrifying realization dawned on him. He burst into manic laughter. Ha ha ha, I get it. Julian Vance. So you do have a weakness. All of this. For a woman. Ha ha ha, you lose. The moment you caught feelings, you lost. I ignored his ravings and waved a hand. The guards dragged him from the room. The dinner was over. Victoria and Serafina took the hint and quietly excused themselves. Soon, the vast dining room was empty, save for me, Nora, and a table of food that had barely been touched. Was it true? What he said? Nora finally spoke, her voice hoarse. Which part? That you did all of this? For me. Her gaze was like that of a frightened deer, unable to meet mine. I pulled out the chair opposite her and sat down. Partially, I admitted. Evan targeted someone he shouldn't have, and he had to pay the price. And the other part, she pressed. The other part, I said, looking at her, is that the reputation of the Vance Corporation is not to be trifled with. It was the perfect answer, completely in line with my character. Rational, cold, putting business first. Nora lowered her head, her long eyelashes casting shadows in the soft light. Thank you, she said softly, for clearing my name and for letting me see him for who he really is. Her tone was a mixture of relief and a subtle, undeniable sadness. I realized then that no matter how vile Evan was, he had been someone Nora trusted. The collapse of that trust was a wound, and I was the one who had ripped it open. You don't have to thank me, I said, pouring myself a glass of water. I was just cleaning up my own mess. You were just caught in the middle. I was trying to pull the line between us back to a safe distance. I told myself that everything was still under my control. Evan was out. Victoria and Serafina now understood the rules. The board was clear, and Nora, the only unexpected variable, should be returned to her original position. Game over, reset to 0. That was the logical choice. It's late. I'll take you home, I said, standing up. She didn't refuse. The ride back was silent. I watched her in the rearview mirror. She kept her head turned, watching the city lights streak past the window, lost in thought. The car stopped at the corner of the street leading to her apartment building. We're here, I said. She unbuckled her seatbelt, but didn't immediately get out. Mr. Vance, she turned, looking at me earnestly. You're a good person. I froze. A good person? It had probably been a decade since anyone had called me that. In the world of business, it was practically synonymous with fool. I looked into her clear eyes, which held not a trace of irony, only sincere conviction. I found it almost laughable. I'm not a good person, I said. You saw what I did tonight. I'll use any means necessary to achieve my goals. That's different, she shook her head. You went after a bad person. And you didn't destroy anyone innocent. She was referring to the fact that I hadn't completely annihilated coal industries, only exposed Evan's crimes. His family's company would take a massive hit, but it wouldn't be a fatal blow. It was the last line I wouldn't cross. And somehow, she had understood that. You should. I started, my throat suddenly dry. Get some rest. She nodded and opened the door. As I watched her disappear down the dark street, I felt a sudden impulse to get out, to follow her, to tell her that Evan was right. The main reason I did everything was for her. But I didn't. I was Julian Vance. I never made a move I wasn't sure of, and I would never let emotion override my reason. I started the car and turned away without hesitation. At that exact moment, a woman's scream echoed from the alley. It was Nora's voice. I slammed on the brakes, my heart skipping a beat. I practically kicked the car door open and sprinted back. The alley was long and poorly lit. I charged in to see two drunk men cornering Nora. One of them had her by the wrist. Hey, little lady, going home all alone? Let us walk ya. The man slurred, a leering grin on his face. Nora was terrified, struggling with all her might. Let go of me. Let me go. A rage I had never felt before erupted in my chest, a white-hot fury that bypassed all thought. I lunged forward, grabbed the man's wrist, and twisted hard. Arg! He screamed, the beer bottle in his hand crashing to the ground and shattering. The other man saw this and swore, swinging a clumsy fist at me. I sidestepped the punch and drove my foot into his knee. He cried out and collapsed to the pavement. The entire confrontation took less than 10 seconds. The world went quiet, filled only by the pained groans of the two men. I turned back to Nora. She was leaning against the wall, her face pale, her eyes wide with lingering fear. She stared at me as if I were a stranger. Only then did I realize what I had just done. I, Julian Vance, had gotten into a fistfight with two lowlifes in a filthy alley for a woman. If a reporter had caught that on camera, I could already picture tomorrow's headline. Vance Corp CEO brawls in street for love, polished image shattered overnight. I loosened my tie, irritated, and walked over to her. Are you all right? My voice was stiff. She shook her head. Then, as if all her strength had abandoned her, she slowly slid down the wall to the ground. I crouched in front of her. Her knee was scraped from struggle, bleeding slightly. I reached out to touch it, then stopped my hand in midair. Can you walk? I asked. She looked up at me, her eyes red and glistening. She didn't speak, just held my gaze. We stayed like that for a long moment, the cool night wind blowing through the alley. Finally, she gave a slight shake of her head. I sighed, resigned. I turned my back to her and crouched down. Get on. I'll carry you. There was no movement behind me. Hurry up, or do you plan on staying here all night? My tone was impatient, but it masked a helplessness I had never acknowledged in myself before. After a few seconds, I felt a soft, warm weight on my back. Her arms wrapped carefully around my neck. Her breath, shaky and light, brushed against my ear. It was barely there, but it felt like a feather tracing a line directly across my heart. I carried her, step by step, out of that dark alley. On my back, I held my entire world. In that moment, I finally understood Evan's last words. The moment you caught feelings you lost. Yes, I had lost. Utterly and completely. I took Nora back to her apartment. It was a small studio, but impeccably clean, the balcony filled with rows of succulents. I set her down on the sofa, found a first aid kit, and knelt before her with cotton swabs and antiseptic to clean the scrape on her knee. My movements were clumsy. I had never done anything like this before. Ouch, she hissed as the antiseptic met the raw skin. Deal with it, I said, my voice still gruff. But then she laughed. What's so funny? I asked, annoyed. Mr. Vance, you're not very good at taking care of people, she said. Shut up. I applied a bandage, stood, and surveyed the small space. You live alone? Yes. The security here is terrible. I'll have Arthur find you a new place tomorrow. No, thank you, she refused immediately. I've lived here a long time. I'm used to it. Tonight was just a fluke. There are no flukes, I said, my tone leaving no room for argument. You're moving tomorrow. She looked at me, saying nothing, her eyes filled with a familiar, stubborn light. We were to stand off again. Julian Vance, she said suddenly, using my full name. What is it you really want? I want to protect you. The words came out before I could stop them. After I said them, I froze. So did she. The air between us turned thick and still. I stared at her, and she stared back, my own reflection captured in her eyes. In that reflection, I saw a flicker of panic I had never seen in myself before. I tried to explain, but words felt useless. What could I say? That from the first moment I saw you shielding a succulent from the rain, I thought you were interesting? That I invited Victoria and Serafina to your cafe just to see how you would react? That I orchestrated that entire takedown not just to ruin Evan, but to pull you out of his web of lies? That the moment I carried you out of that alley, I knew I could never let you go. The words sounded insane, even to me. Do you? She finally spoke, her voice barely a whisper. Do you like me? She asked it so directly, like a stone dropped into the seemingly placid lake of my heart, sending ripples through my entire being.